So today we will be talking about the single season.
Trying to unpack it, it seems like there is a fixation on being single.
I was so focused on on relationships. Like that was my mindset, that was my goal. For whatever reason, I thought it was just going to be the end of the world if I just didn't get into a committed relationship. So I was so focused on that, and that goes into like what you were talking about, how you're just so fixated on that you forget about the one who loves you the most.
The relationship is my idol now. Now I'm seeking God, but I'm only seeking God for the answer of why I'm still in this single season.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Equally Yoked
Podcast.
So today we will be talking about the single season. And you actually brought this up to me the other day.
Yeah.
And I feel like we have different viewpoints on this, so it'll be a little bit interesting, like when we're talking about this, because when you first brought it up to me, I was like, I've been in my single season. But then it was kind of like you had like single season. So go ahead and explain, I guess, your perspective of single season.
Yeah, so I think the interesting point of like single season, from where I've seen a lot, is that there's like a lot of podcasts that typically are like that I say are like ran by women,
Mm-hmm.
and like female podcasts with a female audience. And there's like nothing wrong with the podcast. I watch the podcast, I listen to the podcast, so
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. So no judgment cast there. But it seems like that there's so much fixation on relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and then like in marriage and stuff like that, within these kind of like in this topic of like single season, right? And it's almost like wondering for me if if it's something that people are kind of making an idol of,
Mm-hmm.
right? To the point where you feel like it's a particular season that you're in. So that's kind of where I was interested in. I'm interested to hear some of your viewpoints on it. But like I know one of the things that when I hear single season and just the way that they were saying it, so I'm interested to hear from you, but the way they were saying it, from First John chapter 2 verse 15 and 16, it says, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of flesh, the lust of eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm getting at on that is kind of lusting for that relationship, lusting for that marriage or whatever that thing is, lusting over something kind of replaces where God should be, and is kind of making it more of the relationship is my idol now. Now I'm seeking God, but I'm only seeking God for the answer of why I'm still in this single season.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like from where I was hearing them talk about it,
Yeah.
I was kind of in that place, because it was interesting that they would have like a single woman get on the podcast, and the first thing they want to talk about is, okay, so now you're in your single season, how do you feel?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I was like, I wonder why that's the topic. I wonder why that's something, but it was like consistently in that kind of stuff. And I've seen it on many occasions. And so I was like, are you in your single season?
So I know you brought up like women a lot, but do you think, because I've honestly, because scrolling on TikTok, I've heard men say it as well, and of course, like both can say it. So I guess for a male's perspective, do you not think that there could be like a single season for men as well? Or I don't know how I should really state that, but you know what I mean?
I feel like the fixation on relationships, and like to a certain degree, I feel like is something that a lot of women struggle with more than men, when it comes to like making a relationship their idol. It's something that I've seen in like at least social media wise, I've seen in our society a lot, and it seems like it's always been that kind of way. Even like when we watch like older shows and stuff like that, that seems like marriage seems to always be a fixation that a woman is like focused on, right? I think that might just be how our society structure is. Um, I'm not saying that a man can't want to be with a woman and be looking for his equally yoked partner and stuff like that. I just feel like from my perspective, it seems to be something that um, is more seen, I guess, with women.
I mean, I can see that because obviously I've heard it a lot too. And then like I said before, I've said, that I've been in my single season. But like, I guess with my like perspective of things, my like example for myself was how I told you before, and I've like said that this to y'all as well, of how like relationships were my idol and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to get away from that.
Yeah.
And I guess I would say, like, in my quote unquote single season, that's where I was just focusing on me and God. And rather, like, because beforehand I was pushing God away, like you were mentioning, and just focusing on like relationship, who I could, find, who I can date. And then I realized that I was doing that, and
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm not putting God first, so I need to like fix my relationship with God. I need to focus on God. And so that's why I was calling my single season, I guess you would like, I mean, I will say, because I wasn't focused on relationship with, you know, with man here.
Mm-hmm.
I was focused on my relationship with God more than anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, that makes sense. Because I feel like when I'm like seeing or hearing single season,
Mm-hmm.
like if I'm like trying to unpack it, it seems like there is a fixation on being single,
Yeah.
right? And like that almost being not godly in a way. Not it's almost like you're not there yet. You know, what I'm saying is like being single can feel like, at least when I'm unpacking and I'm hearing single season, it's almost like I haven't crossed the finish line yet. And wondering why or what God is waiting for, or what do I have to learn so that I can meet the partner to get to marriage, or so I can meet the partner so I can get this equally yoked relationship, or who do I have to become so that God can reward me with a partner. When I'm hearing single season, I think in the sense of kind of how we would talk about a Job season, where there is so much learning. And when you say it though, the way that you had identified with the single season and how you defined it, it makes a lot more sense. At least for me, if I was to say that there was a time where I was in a single season, I guess for me, it was just my place of isolation.
Okay, so that's your definition.
Yeah,
Because we're basically talking about the same thing, but I'm labeling it as single season. You're labeling it as isolation season.
yeah. See,
So
but
what would be the difference though? Because you're talking about isolation season, so you're putting isolation over your life.
so it's more like I'm being separated so that I can separating myself and being set apart from the world so that I'm connecting with God. Setting myself apart from worldly things, not setting myself apart from the lust of the flesh, setting myself apart from the lust of the eye, setting myself apart from the pride of life so that I could abide in the Father. That's like what I identify as that isolation, because there's going to be relationships that you have to set yourself apart from. There's going to be
Yeah.
things that you have to set yourself apart from. There's going to be even like jobs and sacrifices that you're going to have to set yourself apart from, because all those things are trying to cast you down when God is trying to call you up. So for me, that isolation, it goes back to like that caterpillar going into that cocoon aspect of like that metamorphosis, that transformation that's about to happen, because you're giving yourself that time with God, setting yourself apart from everything else. Um, that's that for me.
So if how I explain single season, if that basically was the same for like other women as well, are you just basically saying the title needs to be changed?
I'm not saying the title needs to be changed. What I'm saying is that when they were talking about single season,
Yeah.
you just have a different definition of what that means to you.
Yeah.
But when they were saying single season, it was putting so much emphasis on that I don't have another partner. Meaning that they're putting an idol of partnership relationship as like something that they're fixating on, right? And what I was, and so I'm saying that for anybody else who feels like they may be in that single season, but they're not defining it the same way you are.
Yeah.
For somebody who is claiming to be in a single season, have the right heart posture about it. I would prefer if that's what they were defining it as. If if the way that you said your single season was how they were defining their single season, and it not being so much emphasis on being in a relationship, but understanding that because relationships were my idol, I'm choosing to cast it down. I'm choosing to separate myself, set apart myself from relationships so that I can build the most important one of all, so that I can have a relationship with the Father, because man comes and goes, but the Father is here forever.
Yeah.
That is what, if you identify single season that way, I would be okay with it. But it feels like, and at least from what I've seen from multiple podcasts, that it has been a fixation upon having a man, having a woman, having a like a relationship in general, marriage, whatever that may look like. It seems like being single is being kind of placed in an ungodly manner versus what Paul was saying.
When Paul was talking about like it's better for you to be single than to basically like have lust for others. So that's what you were talking about?
Yeah, in that case.
Okay, yeah. But so since you brought all that up, what would be like a way to help these men that are fixated on that?
Basically what I was saying, having an understanding of what, I wouldn't say necessarily, I wouldn't place so much on your singleness of it, but placing it, because the reason why I never would even have,
How there's a season for everything.
yes, that makes sense because there's a time for everything, right? But the process of it for me though is not, I'm in my single season, but I'm in my isolation. But the reason why I would define it more is because I'm not thinking about being alone.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not thinking about being single because I know the relationship that I'm trying to build. I'm just thinking about separating myself. So maybe even isolation may not even be the right term for it either. Maybe it's just separation season, right? But the whole point, it doesn't really matter what you call it, as long as the definition is building the relationship with God, as long as that is the focus, as long as the focus is, I'm not worried about a man, I'm not worried about a woman, I'm not worried about even trying to get rid of the sin. I'm just worried about trying to go closer with the Father. If that is your focus, if that's where your heart posture is, and it's not about what you don't have, but what you're building, what God has already given you, the relationship that He wants with you so much that He's like a gentleman waiting at the door for you to open it for Him, He cares so much for you that He loved you first, and He's just been waiting patiently for you to want to have a relationship with Him. If that is the primary focus, I don't care what you call it. I don't care what season it is for you. As long as that is the primary focus, then I feel like you will have the relationship that you want to have. And when you seek His kingdom first, everything else will be added on to you.
Yeah, that's so true because honestly that was my mindset, which we've already talked about before, but um I mean, we talked about the single season. I told you that definition.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the real part where I was calling it the single season, but I was still, talking to whoever, but I wasn't actually, dating anyone.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm in my single season. Like I was so focused on on relationships. Like that was my mindset. That was my goal. For whatever reason, I thought it was just going to be the end of the world if I just didn't get into a committed relationship. So I was so focused on that. And that goes into like what you were talking about, how you're just so fixated on that you forget about the one who loves you the most. And that's when I was like, okay, we need to flip the script. We need to change this around because this is not working for me at all. And I needed to focus on my relationship with God because who cares about all these other relationships?
Right. let's talk about that, because that is a big step from how you define it now to where you were, right? So I want to know, for people in that situation of where you were in that, what steps did you make so that it was not about those relationships, but it was about your relationship and growing your relationship with God?
I mean, the steps that I took, I mean, they were really simple. I started getting into devotionals more.
Yeah.
Like, I stopped having my mind set on how who I was like talking to or whatever, or like, I mean, when it comes to social media, like who's DMing me and stuff like that. But I just started putting my focus on God,
Mhm.
reading devotionals, reading in the Bible, listening to sermons. So everything that, when I was like by myself outside of whatever I was doing on the daily, I focused on that. And beforehand, like before I started doing that, I was just focusing on texting whoever throughout the day. Like that's my pastime, doing like scrolling on Instagram, talking to people that way. And so I had to get rid of all that, would not like respond to people in the DMs because don't have time for that. I put all my time with God, prayer constantly. I remember and it's so bad that like to even like say this because looking back, but you always look back and you can learn,
Mm-hmm.
learn. And so there would be like days where I wouldn't even pray. And looking back, I'm like, there was a day I didn't go without praying.
Yeah.
Like that's mind blowing, like to think about now. But yeah, I focus on praying more, and just like I said, devotional, just really getting to know God and building a relationship with Him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's the biggest thing. I feel like a lot of times, because of the fact that people don't know how to build a relationship with God, or grow the relationship with God, or spend time with God, that it's easier to try to fill that gap or that hole of unfulfillment and try to fill it with somebody else.
Yeah.
But the problem is that person can never fill the hole that God
And
is
that's what I
supposed
was
to
gonna
fix.
bring up too, because like I was depending on like all these people, we like kind of off topic, but friendships as well.
Yeah.
Like I was kind of depending on them to like fill my cup consistently, and I wouldn't even focusing on myself to like fill up my own cup, but I was just focusing on man, the world, whatever it may be, social media, just to fill my cup to, get me through the day when we have God who can easily fill us up with so much joy, so much happiness. And it's just people neglect him all the time. And it's so sad to think about.
Yeah. I think I really think it goes back to Hosea 4 and 6, where my people are being destroyed because they don't know me. It's understanding that, like, when you're talking about filling up your cup, back when Jesus was at the well, right? And he was saying, if you would, well, she was so fixated on getting the water from the well, but he was like, if you would just if you would take the cup that I give you, you will never thirst again,
Yeah, that
right?
was really a bar when he said
Just, just,
that.
just knowing that what God has for you is so much more than what this world can offer, even when it comes to relationships, because relationships are, there's no better relationship, there's no other relationship that's going to fulfill you, there's no other relationship that should ever take priority in your life other than yours and God's,
Yeah.
because he is the one who created you in the first place. And he's the one who can, like I was saying before, he's the only one who can fill that hole, that gap that a lot of times we replace that love for God with the lust for the world.
Yes.
And so now we're seeking
You
all of
will
these things.
always end up empty.
Yeah, always, because it can't fulfill you. Everything of the world is subsiding, but everything that God gives us is sustaining, right? That's the difference between the world and God. God has something everlasting for you. The world will always leave you being empty.
Yeah, for sure. And like just talking about this, like I know the whole like topic was really on relationships, but I'm just thinking about so many when it comes to money and like people are so fixated on that, like just living lavish lives, all this designer
That's the
that, and
lust
we
of the
just
eyes.
yeah, we just think that all of that is gonna fill us up. It may fill you up temporarily,
Yeah.
but long last, no,
Never.
never.
No, it's even when you make a certain amount of money that you've never made before, you're happy in that moment, but then you make it again and it doesn't even feel the same.
Yeah,
It's the same thing when like people
you're always gonna want more.
you're always going to need more because you have to continuously try to fill that gap. And it's just, you're working off of emotions and stuff like that because lust is fleeting.
Yeah.
Right. But it's supposed to be though. Like nothing that this world, everything in this world is going to perish. So it doesn't make sense why we would keep seeking the world,
Yeah.
instead of seeking God. Because he was here from the very beginning. Not even from the very beginning. He was here before the beginning. He created the beginning. He is the Alpha and the Omega. So it doesn't make sense why we would try to seek, while being real, it doesn't make sense why we would love the creation more than the creator. And that's where it really comes down to. And that's where it comes down to those three forms of lust, right? Those three types of lust. And we get stuck in that. We get stuck in the lust of the flesh. So now you're prioritizing what the person needs to look like in your life, right? You're thinking about all these things of what these people need to be like, but instead of focusing on the Father, right? Because the Father is perfect.
Writing it down in your journal. I want a man with a six-pack. I want a man this height. And like, we're so fixated on it, we'll wake up every morning and read that off and like manifest it like he's just gonna appear the next day or something like that. It's hilarious.
Yep.
And I used to do that.
It sounded like you did.
Oh, I was a fool.
But I can tell you one thing. So the lust of the flesh, I never wrote that stuff down, but I can tell you that the lust of eyes, wanting that power, that the money and stuff like that, I would write down the affirmations I would say that I would become a millionaire and all these different things. And these are not negative things.
I was about to say that.
But the problem is that your focus is on all of them. Your focus is on distractions. And the thing about it is you can't even blame the distraction. Don't blame the distraction, but just improve your focus. Because these things can all be things that you still obtain, but obtain them in the will of God.
Yeah.
Make sure that it's happening in God's will, in God's way, not your way. Because if it happens in God's will and in God's way, he'll sustain it. So that man with the six-pack will be your husband. So that when you want to become,
you might be claiming the wrong six-pack.
Right. but when you're trying to seek this wealth and these things to break generational curses or to just improve the life of your family, it's going to happen the way God has called you to happen. And then when you're talking about the pride of life, making sure that you get rid of your pride, that meekness is not weakness. Right?
Yeah.
And to humble yourself, knowing that knowing that the more you decrease, the more he increases. And that's the perfect place to be with God, being the most humble, because in Matthew 5:5 it says the meek shall inherit the earth. Right? So we take our own pride out of it because we watched the sermon from our church and they were saying that pride will always lead you away from God's promises. And so if we understand that and we want to obtain the things of God's promises, we want to obtain the inheritance that it is our birthright, that God has given us this inheritance. All we have to do is claim it. All we have to start doing is walking as children of God. But it's important that we remember that not to love the world or the things in the world. It's important that we understand that if anyone loves the world, that the love of the Father is not in him. Because it's understanding that, we get Bible study real quick, but it's so important that we extract it though, to understand that if we're loving the Father and the world, that we can't have two masters.
Yeah.
Right? One's got to go. And so if you love the world and you're living for the world, then you're no longer respecting and living for the Father. Because the Father's commands, God's commands for your life is going to be in complete opposition with the world's. So you have to make a decision, right? And we're telling you right now, we're telling you to make the decree and declare right now that you should choose the Father because for our household, we shall serve the Lord. We should stop, because I was expecting
We
you to say,
shall. I know. I was waiting for you to say
but
it.
we shall
Shall
serve
serve
the
the
Lord.
Lord.
Amen. But then we also see that for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, it is not of the Father, but it is of the world, right? So all the things of lust, everything that you're craving, everything that you're desiring, all these things that is about the world, right? The people, the wealth, the fame, and then the pride and the ego, feeling that you should be exalted over other people, that you deserve that promotion more than she does or more than he does, that you deserve to be on stage instead of being in the seat. All these different things, it's just the lust of this world. We have to be willing to let it go so that we can step into what he already has for us. A lot of times our desires get in the way, and our desires is blocking God's design for us. If we can get out of the way, he will surely make one for us.
Amen.
But that's the biggest thing, y'all. And right when I read it, right when I read First John chapter 2 verses 15 through 16, I said this is perfect for this, simply because I knew that a lot of the people who are placing these idols, right, of all these different things. But let's just say, for the sake of the single season, placing single season as an idol, placing a relationship as an idol, that it's important that they know that if they love the world, then the love of the Father isn't in them. Meaning, I can't say that I love these things and also say that I love God, because I can't serve two masters. I have to choose one. And so today is the day where we're here to remind you not only of God's promises for you, but also today is the day where we're here to check you, right? We're here to call you higher and make sure that you choose to love the Father, that you're willing to let go of everything of this world, but you're willing to step into everything that he already has for you. Understand that with an inheritance, somebody has to die. It's a weird way to think of it, right? To know that this wealth, to know that everything, that all these promises that God has placed for us, somebody had to die for it. But the great thing is, none of us did, because Jesus was willing to die for you, just like he was willing to die for us, so that we may have these inheritance, so that we may claim the inheritance that God has for us as the children of God. But we have to be willing to claim it. We have to be willing to step into everything that God has for us, and we must be willing to accept it. And the way that we accept it is by declining everything that the world has.
You summed it all up.
So we do really truly appreciate y'all being a part of this. And hopefully this was beneficial to you. And if it was, we ask that you just share this where on YouTube, share it where all podcasts are streaming, and we'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.